On a storm-drenched night in a quiet mountain town, fate brought together three lives that had been marked by loss. John Miller, a single dad who measured his days in sawdust and promises to his little girl, had long sealed his heart against hope. But under the broken light of an abandoned bus stop, he saw Emma, a young nurse in soaked scrubs, clutching nothing but a silver ring and her fading strength. What began as a simple act of compassion soon unraveled into a story of truth, justice, and the healing power of family. Stay with us, because this is more than survival. It is a tale of second chances, of storms that strip us bare, and of love found in the most unexpected places. Rain hammered against the windshield of John Miller's old pickup truck, each drop blurring the road until the town's dim street lamps stretched into streaks of gold. It was nearly midnight, and John's muscles ached from a 12-hour shift at the garage. His flannel shirt still smelled of oil, and his hands carried the permanent stains of grease that no soap could wash away. Beside him, 9-year-old Lily fought drowsiness, her small body wrapped in a blanket and her frayed stuffed rabbit tucked beneath her chin. Her pigtails, crooked but earnest, were the result of John's morning attempt at a braid tutorial he'd half understood but tried anyway. These little rituals, he thought, were the measure of his fatherhood, not perfect, but constant. As the truck turned past the old bus stop, John noticed a figure hunched on the bench, soaked to the bone. A woman in scrubs, her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Rain dripped from her hair, plastering it to her face, and in her trembling hand something small slipped free, a silver ring that clattered into a puddle. She didn't reach for it. She didn't move at all, as if the storm had drowned the will from her body. John's first instinct was to keep driving. He had learned the hard way not to open his life to strangers. Since his wife's death, his world had been pared down to one sacred duty: Lily. Everything else, grief, loneliness, the aching silence of the house, was managed by routines: work at the garage, dinner on the table, Monopoly on Friday nights, fixing Mrs. Green's kitchen chair without charge. Small, controlled pieces of life. Bringing a crying stranger into that fragile balance felt dangerous. But Lily stirred, her clear eyes following the woman through the rain-streaked window. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice filled with the certainty only children carry. "She's crying. We have to stop." John tightened his grip on the wheel, jaw clenched. He could hear his late wife's voice in Lily's tone, that same instinct to help, to see beyond the surface. With a sigh, he pulled the truck over. The rain slapped his back as he stepped out, water soaking through his shirt in seconds. He approached the bench carefully. "Miss?" he asked, voice steady but cautious. "Are you all right?" The woman lifted her head. Her eyes were rimmed red, her lips trembling. She tried to speak but only managed a hoarse, "I'm fine." Her gaze flicked to the silver ring glinting in the puddle, but she made no move to retrieve it. John bent down, picked up the ring, and held it out. "You dropped this." Their fingers brushed as she took it, and he felt the cold in her skin, a chill that went deeper than the storm. "You'll freeze out here," he said firmly, though his tone softened. He removed his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Come on. There's warmth at my place, just until the rain eases." She shook her head weakly. "No, I can't. I shouldn't." At that moment, Lily burst from the truck, splashing through puddles. She ran straight to the woman, slipping her small hand into hers. "Please come," Lily said, her voice clear as bells in the downpour. "It's warm at our house. You look like you need it." The woman's composure crumbled. Tears spilled anew, mingling with the rain. She gave the smallest nod, unable to refuse the child's sincerity. John guided her to the truck. In the cab, the heater coughed weakly, filling the space with humid warmth. The scent of antiseptic and lavender clung to her scrubs. Lily, without a word, tucked her stuffed rabbit into the woman's lap, as though passing along a piece of comfort. When they arrived at the Miller home, John opened the door to a world of contrast. The wood stove glowed, filling the small living room with warmth. Tools lined one wall, and crayons littered the coffee table where Lily often worked on her drawings. The house bore traces of the woman who once completed their family. A faded quilt folded neatly, a photograph above the mantel of John, Lily as a toddler, and his late wife smiling into the camera. The woman hesitated at the threshold, visibly overwhelmed. "Emma," she murmured finally, as if offering her name was an act of trust. For John, this moment was a step into dangerous territory. For years, he had sworn to keep the world at bay. Yet as he watched Emma's uncertain eyes shift from the photograph to Lily's eager smile, something deep within him stirred something he thought long buried. The rain still beat against the windows, but inside, the storm felt strangely far away. The Miller home was small but carried its history in every corner. The faded quilt on the couch still smelled faintly of lavender, a relic from John's late wife. On the mantel above the wood stove, the family photograph stared back. John younger, Lily barely 2, and his wife with a smile that seemed to light the whole frame. To Emma, stepping into that space felt almost intrusive, as though she were trespassing in a shrine to a life that no longer existed. She sat gingerly on the edge of the couch, still wrapped in John's jacket, while Lily busied herself bringing blankets and pillows until Emma's lap overflowed. At one point, Lily pressed her battered stuffed rabbit into Emma's hands, whispering, "You can borrow him tonight. He helps me when I feel sad." Emma hugged it, her throat tightening. John set a steaming bowl of soup before her at the table. The smell of herbs filled the room, grounding her. At first she simply held the spoon, staring at her reflection in the broth. Then the words tumbled out, raw and hesitant. "6 months ago, I lost my parents in a car accident. I was working as a nurse at City General. I thought my job would anchor me through the grief. But instead, it destroyed me." Her voice cracked, and she clutched the spoon tighter. She explained how she had uncovered discrepancies in the hospital's medication supply. Children had been given watered-down treatments, patients harmed by greed. She reported it, convinced it was the right thing. But instead of protection, she was branded disloyal. Her supervisor orchestrated her dismissal. Colleagues stopped returning her calls, and soon she was blacklisted. With no job and mounting bills, her apartment slipped away. All that remained was the backpack by her feet and one precious possession. She drew out a worn leather journal, its pages fragile at the edges. "This was my mother's," she said softly. "She wrote every day, about love, about me, about hope. When I feel like I've vanished, I read it. It reminds me I was loved once." Lily leaned forward eagerly. "Can I read something?" Without waiting for permission, she flipped the book open and read aloud in her clear child's voice. "Emma has such a tender heart. She'll heal the world one day, just like she healed me when she was little." The words settled into the room like a prayer. Emma's composure shattered. Tears spilled freely as she pressed her hands to her face. John listened silently, his chest heavy. He saw in her story the reflection of his own, the cruelty of loss, the struggle to carry on while the world felt indifferent. He reached across the table and laid his calloused hand over hers. It was not eloquent, but it was steady. Emma lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes, and for the first time felt something close to safety. Then came the detail that stopped John cold. One of the patients who suffered most from the shortages. Emma hesitated, then forced herself to continue. A young man named Daniel Miller. He was only 22. I'll never forget his face. John's spoon froze midway to his mouth. Daniel Miller, his cousin. The boy he had once taught to ride a bike, who had helped him rebuild the garage roof before heading off to college. John had always believed Daniel's death was a tragic accident of illness. Now Emma was telling him it was preventable, a life stolen by negligence and greed. His heart clenched as grief and anger surged. Emma saw his expression and faltered. "You knew him?" John's voice was rough, almost a growl. "He was family. Silence stretched, thick and unbearable. Emma's face paled. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to say it." The storm outside howled against the windows, echoing the storm inside John's chest. He rose abruptly, pacing, every muscle taut. Yet as he glanced at Lily, asleep now on the couch with the journal still in her lap, something softened. He realized Emma wasn't the enemy. She was carrying the same loss, only from another angle. She hadn't caused Daniel's death. She had tried to stop it. Later that night, Emma's body succumbed to fever. She lay shivering on the couch, sweat beading on her forehead. John found her burning hot, her breaths shallow. Despite the turmoil inside him, his instincts took over. He fetched cool cloths, brewed tea, and sat beside her, keeping vigil. In her delirium, Emma clutched his hand and whispered, "Don't leave me." The words pierced him. For years he had promised himself never to let anyone close enough to depend on him again. But the reply slipped out, quiet yet certain, "I won't." The hours crawled by, but he never moved from her side. When dawn finally broke, pale light spilling through the curtains, Emma stirred weakly. She opened her eyes to find Lily curled beside her, a blanket draped across both their laps, and John slumped in a chair, head bowed in exhaustion. A tear slid down her cheek, but this time it was not from despair. For the first time in months, she felt she was not alone. When Emma's fever passed, the fragile peace of the Miller home gave way to a new determination. John could not unhear her words about Daniel, his cousin who had died under circumstances everyone had accepted as fate. Now he knew it had been negligence, greed disguised as policy. For years, he had carried quiet guilt, wondering if he could have done more for Daniel. Emma's story reframed that grief. Daniel had been betrayed by those sworn to heal. And Emma, despite losing everything, had tried to fight for him. That realization became the thread binding John's guarded heart to hers. One evening, he stood by the workbench in his garage, the familiar scent of motor oil and pine sawdust in the air. Emma came to the doorway, her face pale but steady. "I want to finish what I started," she said. "I can't let them bury this." "But I can't do it alone." John set down his wrench, meeting her gaze. "Then you won't. We'll do it together." The lawyer he introduced them to was a wiry man with sharp eyes and an old-fashioned integrity. Emma laid out her evidence. Emails, records, handwritten notes from shifts where the shortages had harmed patients. John added his testimony of Daniel, once healthy, suddenly gone. It was thin, but it was something. Weeks later, a surprise arrived. Dr. Harold Bennett, Emma's old mentor, returned from retirement. He had known the truth but been silenced by threats. Now he was ready to speak. The local newspaper picked up the story. Whistleblower nurse fired after exposing deadly drug scheme. The article named names, detailed the corruption, and for the first time, Emma was not portrayed as unstable or reckless. She was courageous. Families of patients came forward, recounting their own unexplained losses. The community, once indifferent, rallied. Neighbors stopped John on the street to say they admired his support. Emma found herself thanked by strangers in the grocery store, their gratitude both humbling and overwhelming. The hospital administration cracked under investigation. Her former supervisor resigned in disgrace, and the state opened a broader inquiry. Emma was vindicated. But the victory was not hers alone. For John, it was the first time Daniel's death felt acknowledged, not forgotten. Standing at Daniel's graveside with Emma beside him, John whispered, "You didn't die for nothing. They can't erase you now." Back home, Lily became the heart of their healing. At the spring festival, she proudly displayed her crayon drawing. 3 figures, her dad with his tools, herself with pigtails, and Emma in her nurse's uniform. Across the top, in crooked letters, she had written "My family." Teachers smiled, but John's chest tightened as he stared at it. Later, Emma confessed softly, "I didn't correct her. Because when she said it, I wanted it to be true." John's carefully guarded walls finally gave way. That night, beneath the quiet lamplight, he admitted, "I've been so afraid. Afraid to love again. Afraid to risk Lily's heart and mine. But you've changed that. You've shown me that hope isn't weakness." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "And you gave me back what I thought I'd lost forever, a home." Months later, John and Emma transformed part of his workshop into a small health corner, offering free care for families who couldn't afford insurance. It wasn't grand, but it mattered. Every week neighbors came through, some for medical advice, others just to feel seen. The garage no longer smelled only of oil and engines. It smelled of coffee, of antiseptic, of community. Emma found her vocation again, not in sterile hallways of a corrupt hospital, but in a place built on trust. On the anniversary of that stormy night, the three of them walked home under another drizzle. Lily skipped between them, splashing through puddles, clutching both their hands. Emma wore the silver ring again, no longer a relic of grief, but a symbol of survival and connection. At the door, 3 pairs of muddy shoes lined up neatly, one large, one small, one new, different sizes but side by side. For John, it was proof that storms could take, but they could also give. Daniel's loss would always ache, but through Emma, through Lily, something new had been born. A family, a purpose. And in the quiet warmth of that truth, John finally allowed himself to believe in second chances. Some storms arrive to break us, but others come to wash away the past and reveal what truly matters. For John, the single dad who once believed his world would remain small, and for Emma, the nurse who lost everything but her integrity, that night of rain became the beginning of something greater. Together with little Lily, they built not just a home, but a place where courage, love, and justice could take root. Their journey reminds us that second chances are real, and that even the darkest nights can lead to mornings filled with hope. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in healing and love after loss. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Soul Stirring Tales for more stories that inspire and move the soul.